A top golfer's skill is amazing. They can hit a ball at 268 km/h and roll it into the target hole after crossing a wide forest. This shot left the poor kid next to him stunned. But he wasn't scared by the opponent. Facing his last shot, Francis checked every angle, knowing a small mistake would cost him the finals. After a long look, he swung his last shot carefully under everyone's eyes. As the ball rolled on the grass, everyone held their breath, eyes following it. When the ball fell into the hole, it showed this poor kid made his mark in a rich-dominated sport. Some might ask why it's hard for regular folks to play golf. I thought it was money, but after this true story, I saw it's more about social inequality and aristocratic power. If you're curious about golf's hidden history, Francis's story can enlighten you. Because of poverty, Francis worked as a caddy to help his family. Being around it, he became obsessed with golf. The owner saw his interest and gave him a club, planting a dream in his heart. After that, his mom heard noises from upstairs every night. Opening his door, she found Francis practicing golf by candlelight, using a teacup as a hole, as dedicated as ancient scholars. Though his mom scolded him for the noise, she never stopped his dream. His father, however, was unsupportive. When Francis begged him to see the British champion Harry, his father refused, thinking golf was for aristocrats, unreachable for commoners. But his mom didn't care about the aristocratic system. So, when Harry performed in America, she lied about taking Francis shopping. Actually, it was to take her to see Harry's match. When Francis crossed the muddy island and reached the busy square, he saw the giant poster of his idol and understood his mom's intention. Then, he ran towards the idol's venue. His mom, worried, followed him. When Francis squeezed through the crowd to the front of the stage, he saw Harry's perfect swing. The morning's volume made the crowd applaud, but it also made Francis's heart skip a beat. At this moment, Harry wanted to invite a fan on stage. Francis looked around, saw no one going up, and quickly ran up. But he was so nervous seeing his idol that his first swing was clumsy, not even hitting the ball. Laughter erupted, but only his mom encouraged him not to lose heart. Harry noticed his embarrassment, crouched down, and gently comforted him. Even if surrounded by ridicule and doubt, never give up. Then, he handed the club to Francis, guiding him. Francis swung a nearly perfect shot. The laughter was replaced by applause. Seeing this, Harry showed an appreciative expression, unaware that this boy would become his strongest rival. Because of this special experience, Francis became more obsessed with golf. He practiced in the garden with a flag during the day and continued honing his skills in the attic at night. This continued for 13 years. This persistence led him to win many school competitions. Now, 20-year-old Francis is an amateur golfer and still works part-time as a caddy. His employer admired his skills and often let him swing a few shots. But this time, the boss appeared, making Francis nervous because caddies aren't allowed to play during work. Afraid of punishment, he made several mistakes. Yet, even so, he scored 81 on the toughest course. The boss, instead of punishing him, discussed with the employer to recommend him for the National Amateur Championship. This unexpected surprise made Francis beam with joy. But when he went to register at the Golf Association, he faced endless ridicule and discouragement. In the eyes of these aristocrats, caddies aren't qualified to compete unless they pay a $50 membership fee. Even though this amount was a year's income for an average person back then, Francis didn't want to miss this chance. So, he went home to ask his father for help. But his father said, "What's the point of competing? It doesn't earn money or support a family. Moreover, no matter how hard you try, the rich won't truly let you into their circle." However, after Francis's persistent pleading, his father finally agreed to pay the $50. But the condition was, if he lost, he could never play golf again and must learn a trade to live a peaceful life. Actually, his father was conflicted inside. He wanted his son to succeed and open new doors, but didn't want him to suffer on the path to his dreams. This is perhaps a struggle every parent faces. As the competition date approached, the Golf Association held a grand pre-match banquet. As a contestant, Francis was naturally invited. But facing the upper-class world for the first time, he felt awkward and out of place. However, just when he was at a loss, he unexpectedly met a beautiful noble girl. Francis candidly admitted he was a caddy and wore a bartender's outfit because he couldn't afford a suit. The girl, instead of showing disdain, warmly invited him to dance. But before the dance ended, her brother interrupted. He immediately recognized Francis as a caddy and made unfriendly personal attacks. When Francis tried to defend himself, the girl's father, who was also the president of the Golf Association, happened to walk over. With inherent arrogance, he mocked Francis, saying attending the banquet doesn't mean he can enter the lavish high society. These insulting words left Francis humiliated. After the banquet, he immediately found the golf course owner to confide in. The owner handed him a golf book with a note. There are two types of players, those who can control themselves and win, and those who can't. This saying applies not only to golf but to any dream chaser in any field. The day of the competition arrived quickly. Even though no one believed in Francis, he didn't care because he was confident he could crush all doubts and ridicule. Sure enough, one swing fired up the noble's enthusiasm. The girls watching also lit up with bright smiles. But her brother wasn't happy. Francis played the qualifiers perfectly, advancing smoothly. Avoid major mistakes, and he can advance to the next round. Just as he aimed for a key shot, his dad showed up, throwing him off. Every kid wants to prove themselves to their dad, especially Francis. The more he rushed, the more nervous he got. Francis lost the match he shouldn't have, wasting his chance. His dad saw and left disappointed. The girl's brother mocked. "Stick to being my caddy." The girl wanted to comfort him but didn't know how. Francis's score stayed at 58, meaning she had to give up her dream. His mom glared at his dad, but he believed he was right, thinking ordinary folks can't enter the noble world. Better to let his son see reality early than wander hopelessly. Francis gave up in front of his dad, but his inner fire never died. Triple Crown winner Harry had it worse. As a kid, he woke to nobles in top hats tearing down his home. Like real estate developers, they seized the land with a coin. Harry's family started a wandering life. But now, Harry is the strongest player. Francis wants to be like him, transcending class with talent. Francis only saw the surface, not knowing Harry is still a tool. The British ordered him to join the US Open and win. To be safe, they found him a strong partner. The US, never beating Britain, is recruiting players to avenge. Francis no longer plays. He's a handyman now. However, his past excellent performance made him a target for recruitment, but Francis refused the invitation because he didn't want to be someone who was abandoned. Yet, when he was about to go home after work, he saw that Harry would also participate in this open tournament. To seize the opportunity to compete alongside his idol, he decided to be reckless one more time. So, he immediately found the person in charge of the sneakers and asked for another chance, even expressing his willingness to give up sponsorship and prize money. Initially, the association was reluctant to agree, but with the strong recommendation of the court owner, Francis was granted the qualification to participate. Moreover, to prevent him from making the same mistakes as last time, the owner personally provided him with comprehensive guidance. The guidance was not only about technical skills but also about teaching him how to control his emotions. With day after day of training, Francis's golf skills improved significantly, and he successfully made it to the open tournament. However, while he was still immersed in joy, his father, upon learning the truth, scolded him to withdraw immediately and told him that one must know their own limits. Some people are born without worrying about making a living, and golf is just a toy for them. But for some people, like their family, they have to worry about basic needs every day. Seeing that Francis was unmoved, his father finally threatened him, saying if you insist on participating in the competition, then never come back home again. Francis didn't understand why his father was so stubborn. In the long river of life, there are very few effective opportunities. Once you are lucky enough to encounter one, you should seize it firmly, even if it means getting shattered. Therefore, with high aspirations, he decided to overcome all obstacles and create a miracle once more. But this time, the competition was an international event, not only gathering top players from around the world but also filled with unprecedented tension, and everyone's attention was almost entirely focused on Harry, with no one paying attention to the newcomer Francis. Even the caddy he had arranged in advance was intercepted halfway. However, when he was at a loss, he happened to meet a classmate who came to join the fun, so he immediately asked the classmate to be his caddy. The classmate's younger brother, Eddie, seemed to really like the sport and urged his brother to agree. But on the day of the competition, the classmate didn't manage to skip class successfully, so only Eddie took 3 buses to fulfill the promise. Watching the little guy who wasn't even as tall as the golf club, Francis thought he couldn't handle the job of a caddy, but Eddie kept insisting, saying, "You have to trust me." With no other caddy available, Francis reluctantly agreed. Thus, an unusual yet great partnership was born. When the match officially began, Francis swung his club continuously, ready to showcase his skills on the vast course. Eddie, however, accidentally broke the tee, making the already nervous Francis even more anxious. But Eddie quickly got the hang of it, and the two became increasingly in sync. Francis's white ball soared into the air, landing gracefully on the lush green field. Each subsequent shot was equally impressive, while Harry struggled. Harry found it difficult because a nobleman in a tall hat was watching, and he couldn't overcome the childhood trauma. His hands trembled on the club, causing him to miss several good shots. Meanwhile, Francis, focused and undistracted, played more smoothly. By the end of the first round, he had astonishingly climbed from last place to second. This caught the attention of the president, who came to watch in person. Seeing this, the association's people immediately approached Francis, urging him to defeat the British in the second round so as not to disappoint the president. As Francis stood speechless, overwhelmed, Eddie quickly pulled him away, fearing the pressure would affect him. But Francis was visibly shaken. He couldn't maintain his focus, and under this invisible pressure, his first shot was a failure, drawing gasps from the crowd. The quick change in attitude was noted by Eddie with just a glance. However, with Eddie's encouragement, Francis soon regained his composure. Just then, the girl he admired came to watch, but they barely exchanged words. Before they were separated by the swarm of reporters, the girl had no choice but to give Eddie a gift to pass on. Although young, Eddie knew well that women could distract men, so he didn't immediately give the gift to Francis. By the end of the first day's match, Francis was in 7th place, with the top 3 spots all held by British players, especially Harry's partner, who was a formidable opponent. On the 17th hole, his ball seemed to have GPS, zooming through the sun-dappled cat jungle at lightning speed, finally landing steadily at the edge of the green's small slope. Faced with such incredible skill, even the American audience couldn't help but shed tears of admiration. Yet, the first place still belonged to the golf legend, Harry. However, he wasn't arrogant at all. Instead, when he met Francis, he sincerely praised him for playing so well. Francis was so thrilled by his idol's compliment that he grinned from ear to ear. Even when he returned home with Eddie, his face was still beaming with happiness. However, when Francis eagerly shared the day's glorious moments with his family, his father, weary from work, gave him a harsh reality check. His father pulled out a newspaper and criticized Francis, saying that he played in the tournament but didn't even win any prize money. Others win and at least get some cash, but he only spends on entry fees. These accusations pierced Francis's heart like bullets. He never expected that, in his father's eyes, money was more important than his dreams. And so, the two parted ways again, their differences unresolved. To make matters worse, a heavy rainstorm started that night and continued into the next day. But when Francis stepped outside, he was surprised to find Eddie waiting in the rain, excitedly saying he dreamed Francis scored a 70. Seeing the small but resilient Eddie, Francis's gloom from the night before vanished. Despite the mud underfoot, they both resolutely moved forward toward their dreams. In the relentless downpour, the third round officially began. The leaderboard rankings changed constantly over time. Some were thrown off by the weather, their rankings dropping, while others managed to keep their composure and soared up the ranks. Francis's performance today was especially flawless, and his ranking quickly rose from the bottom. Confidence soared to 3rd place and quickly made headlines in American newspapers. The media declared Francis as America's hope. His laborer father accidentally saw the newspaper, and his weathered face was instantly filled with disbelief. But for Britain, this was definitely bad news. Therefore, the top brass immediately ordered Harry to widen the score gap in the next shot. However, Harry couldn't shake off the shadow in his heart. The hi-hat felt like a shackle, restraining his abilities. Ultimately, this shot landed in a water hazard. But Harry, after all, was a seasoned veteran. Once he adjusted his mindset, he precisely sent Uniri's ball to the distant hole. This miraculous move restored the British officials' previously deflated confidence. Meanwhile, the previous American champion, overwhelmed by pressure, mistakenly hit the ball into the woods, losing the chance to enter the finals. Now, Francis truly became America's last hope, which doubled his pressure, especially with his idol Harry watching from the sidelines. As a result, this shot didn't achieve the expected effect. Seeing his unstable emotions, Eddie brought out the girl's gift. Sure enough, with the power of love, Francis performed exceptionally well in the following shots. Even with a crowd of spectators around, he remained unfazed. Hearing the cheers, his mother dropped her chores and rushed to the scene. At this moment, Francis reached match point. As long as this shot was strong enough, he could enter the finals. After calculating for a full 10 minutes, Francis finally swung the decisive shot. Watching the cue ball inch towards the hole, the audience held their breath in anticipation. Francis was so nervous that his brow furrowed. Fortunately, the shot lived up to expectations and fell into the hole. The audience erupted, tossing their hats into the air to celebrate this historic moment. However, seeing Francis on the newspaper headlines, the British officials were furious, cursing loudly. They not only belittled Francis as a country bumpkin but also claimed his entry into the finals was pure luck. Hot-tempered Charlie couldn't stand it and stormed off. Even the usually calm Harry lost his temper, bravely confronting the feared aristocrats for the first time. "I play for myself. If Francis wins tomorrow's match, it's simply because he's excellent." These words left the noble Earl extremely embarrassed, but those in power never think they are wrong. Taking away is a right ingrained in their bones. The resistance of the common people is naturally the result of accumulated grievances. Soon, the day of the finals arrived amidst great anticipation. As Francis was about to leave for the arena, his father was already standing outside the door. Although he didn't offer verbal blessings, Francis still understood his intentions. However, when Francis excitedly arrived at the stadium, he saw Eddie helplessly smoking. It turned out that someone thought he wasn't professional enough and wanted to replace Francis with a new caddy. Some people in high positions simply don't care about the personal thoughts of those at the bottom. But Francis was firm in his stance, not only assuring Eddie that he would not change partners but also warning the association not to act on their own. After the order of play was decided by drawing lots, the greatest match officially began. The road to the course was already crowded with people, and the encouragement for Francis was continuous. In the hearts of ordinary Americans, this wasn't just a golf match, it was more like a direct confrontation across class lines. Upon reaching the course, all three players made equally impressive first shots, which gave Francis confidence. It turned out that former champions were just ordinary people too. But just as he finished speaking, Charlie County made a beautiful shot that ordinary people couldn't achieve, giving him a harsh lesson. However, Francis had grown by now. He would no longer feel intimidated by a strong opponent, nor would he become unstable under pressure. Instead, he made a record-breaking shot at the spot where he previously made a mistake. Although Harry and his friends said that Francis wasn't a threat, they still used a joint tactic on the next shot. Harry directly blocked Francis's ball just to give his teammate a chance for an extra shot. However, Francis easily resolved it with his superb skills. Instead, it was Harry's teammate who accidentally hit the ball onto a distant century-old tree on the 14th hole, thus losing the chance to compete for the championship. Now, only Francis and Harry were left for the ultimate showdown. Unfortunately, they were evenly matched, and neither could gain an advantage over the other for 3 consecutive holes, until they reached the 17th hole of the L-shaped course. Harry was overwhelmed by the fear deeply rooted in his distant memories. He glanced at the woods in the middle, then swung the most confident shot of his life. After seeing this, Francis wanted to follow suit, but Eddie, who was beside him, pulled him back because he thought there might be a trap ahead. Ultimately, Francis chose to trust Eddie and swung his club methodically. When the alien reached the woods, Harry was dumbfounded. As Eddie had said, it was indeed a sand trap, which was a huge challenge for Harry and cost him his earlier advantage. However, being experienced, he still managed to get the ball close to the hole. This earned him genuine admiration from his opponent, Francis. But facing such a strong rival, Francis was not intimidated. He seized the opportunity and took the lead by 1 stroke over Harry. Soon, they were near the 18th hole. People gathered to witness this historic moment, including his hardworking mother and a noble girl who admired him. If Francis could sink the ball in 1 stroke, he would win the championship. Faced with the glory and dreams within reach, Francis was so nervous that his palms were sweating. Despite trying to stay calm, the ball eventually rolled away from the hole. On the other side, Harry breathed a sigh of relief because if his ball went in, the match would go into overtime. Watching the white ball slowly roll towards the hole, Francis was so nervous he could hardly breathe. Just when everyone thought the ball would go in, it suddenly stopped as if someone had pressed the pause button. 2/3 of the ball was hanging over the hole. The decisive moment was back in Francis's hands, but so was the immense pressure. What was usually an easy shot for him now seemed incredibly difficult because Harry's ball was right at the edge of the hole. As he hesitated, unsure of his next move, Eddie came over to encourage him, saying, "You just need to let the ball fall into the hole." Although Eddie appeared calm, he unconsciously made a praying gesture behind his back. The audience was equally tense, as they needed this inspiring victory. After hearing Eddie's words, Francis's eyes became determined, and then, with one swift motion, he struck the ball, and it landed perfectly in the hole. At that moment, the entire audience erupted in cheers. His mother was astonished, and Harry was deeply impressed by Francis's performance. The crowd at the stadium rushed towards Francis and Eddie, then lifted them high into the air. Who would have thought that this duo from the lowest rung of society could snatch the championship from the reigning champions with their skills? When the audience learned they had no prize money, they eagerly offered their own savings to them. Just as Francis was overwhelmed with excitement, he suddenly saw a familiar pair of large hands. Yes, they were his father's hands holding money. At that moment, his father's face showed a smile of relief and praise. The gap between father and son vanished completely. Francis proved himself with his skills, but later he still followed his father's advice and became an outstanding businessman. However, along the way, he also won the U.S. Amateur Championship twice and became a lifetime honorary ambassador for the event. Eddie later became a billionaire and remained a lifelong friend of Francis. Meanwhile, Harry won the British Open for the 6th time the following year, earning recognition as the greatest British golfer. The Greatest Game Ever Played was directed by Bill Paxton, starring Shia LaBeouf and Stephen Dillane, and released in 2005. The film is based on Mark Frost's best-selling novel of the same name, inspired by a true story from the world of golf. Francis was originally from a humble background, but as a caddy at a golf course from a young age, he gradually developed a strong interest in golf. However, at that time, golf was merely a pastime for the nobility and gentlemen, and people from lower classes had no right to participate. His father frequently stopped him from getting involved in golf to prevent him from being disappointed. Yet, with his mother's unconditional support, Francis steadfastly pursued his dream, ultimately overcoming various external and internal obstacles to become an outstanding amateur player. He even defeated excellent professional players to win the championship. Francis's ability to defy the odds was not only due to his strong interest in golf but also his relentless daily practice and unwavering commitment to his dream. Besides his own persistence and effort, he never rejected others' opinions and help, even if they came from someone as young as a 10-year-old kid. It was Eddie, this young friend, who helped Francis go further on his path to success, as Francis had already mastered the technical skills. But the mindset is easily influenced by external factors. In major competitions, mindset becomes even more crucial. So, Eddie's seemingly casual encouragement always comes to the rescue. Francis's fear of loss also pushed him to become a truly outstanding player. Looking at successful people around the world, almost every one of them has a firm goal and ideal. Because before dreams come true, you must first have dreams. Yet many people lose their desire in pursuit of dreams after being battered by society. They think it's just a fantasy, impossible to achieve. But nothing in the world is truly impossible, perhaps at the very beginning. You will face setbacks one after another, feeling defeated time and again. But as long as you still have dreams in your heart and work towards them, there will always be a day when the flowers bloom. Even if things don't turn out as you wished, so what? In the process of striving, you will gain a lot that can help you identify true friends, overcome inner fears, and become stronger. With these valuable assets, even if grand dreams aren't realized, you can still live an extraordinary life. Well, that's all for today's movie. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Looking forward to our next encounter.